Hello YouTube, this is Corey Newman. Today I want to discuss Operation Tailwind, the second National Air Defense exercise that took place on July 10th to the 12th of 1953. Operation Tailwind should not be confused with the later Operation Tailwind that took place during the Vietnam War on September the 11th to the 14th, 1970. So, the planning for Operation Tailwind, the second National Air Defense exercise, planning began in July 1952 with correspondences between the Air Defense Command and the Royal Canadian Air Force for a future joint exercise in July 1953. On June 20th, 1953, the Strategic Air Command published Operations Order 61-53 and amended it on July 1st, 1953. Subordinate bomber wings would publish their own operation orders in early July. On June 25th, 1953, the Air Defense Command published Operations Order 8-53. The start of the exercise was on July 9th, 1953. This is called Execution Day. The SAC units taking part in Operation Tailwind were elements of the 2nd, 8th, and 15th Air Forces. On July 11th, 1953, SAC provided 24 B-36 aircraft, 28 B-47 aircraft, 24 B-50s, and 18 B-29s. There was an additional 6 B-47 aircraft and 6 B-29s aircraft made available from crew training forces. 12 B-29s from radar calibration squadrons were also used as an aggressor force later in the afternoon. On July 12th, the Strategic Air Command provided 36 B-36, 35 B-36 aircraft, 5 B-47 aircraft, 41 B-50 aircraft, 18 B-29 aircraft, and 9 KC-97 tanker aircraft. 13 B-29s from radar calibration squadrons were also used as aggressor forces. The defensive forces consisted of 79 radar stations, 3 augmentation radar stations, 3 naval radar stations, 4 passive detection sites, 1 naval picket ship, 51 fighter interceptor squadrons, 17 naval aircraft, and 186 anti-aircraft artillery gun batteries on site, operational. The Air Defense Command narrative. In the official history of the Air Defense Command, had this to say about Operation Tailwind. In view of the findings of Operation Signpost, ADC informed higher headquarters in early 1953 that it would be most beneficial to the Air Defense Command to have an exercise program that would include 2 command-wide exercises a year. These exercises to be in lieu of 9 small-scale exercises and 1 large-scale exercise that had been previously scheduled during the annual exercise program. Higher headquarters sanctioned the proposal, granting ADC the authority to conduct 1 command-wide exercise every 6 months. 1 during the long daylight hours and in good weather of the summer months, and the other during the limited daylight hours and adverse weather of the winter months. In consonance with this changed exercise program, plans were laid in early 1953 for the conduct of a joint Canadian-U.S. Air Force air defense exercise dubbed Tailwind, to be held in July 1953, with the Strategic Air Command serving as the main aggressor force. In this planning, many objectives were outlined. Examination of some of the weaknesses brought to light in Operation Signpost provided a starting point for the planning of specific tests. New evaluations were planned to test such important items as the ability to assess strike forces accurately, capability to take timely fighter action, and time required to implement the security control of air traffic and electromagnetic radiation plan, or scatter. Effectiveness of the multiple corridor plan, reaction to simultaneous penetrations and saturation conditions, the effects of unlimited electronic countermeasures, or ECM, on radars and communications, and the adequacy of current standard operating procedures. It was felt that experience was needed for both ADC units and augmentation forces in countering realistic techniques of attack. The operation began in the early hours of the morning on Saturday, July 11th, and ended 37 hours later on Sunday afternoon. For the most part, objectives outlined were attained. In spite of SAC's deviation from the planned schedule in the initial strike, and in spite of certain compromises which had to be made with realism for one reason or another, the final conclusion reached was that Operation Tailwind provided the command with a great deal of information which will guide us in perfecting existing procedures and will point the way for a better planning for the air defense system of tomorrow. The history went on to say that the second great test of the augmentation plan came in July 53 when Operation Tailwind, the second nationwide air defense exercise, was held. During this exercise, a total of 182 aircraft were made available by ARTC, the Air Proving Ground Command, Tactical Air Command, and the Strategic Air Command. The number was not as large as it might have been because of the extensive conversion program underway at this time, plus heavy losses to overseas activities in the Korean War. The deployment time averaged 8 hours and 22 minutes, which was an improvement over the 10 to 12 hours required during the previous Operation Signpost. Primarily, this reduction in time was due to the deletion of several long flights made in the 1952 exercise, and to the higher speed of jet fighters used in Tailwind, rather than to any improvements in methods. Much less time was required for briefing the deployed crews than in Signpost, however, indicating an improvement in the indoctrination efforts during the year, and in Tailwind, alerting from ADC headquarters to the tactical units deploying was tried, and communication times were greatly reduced. Following the exercise, ADC worked out a plan with all subordinate commands except for SAC, which established on a definite basis a procedure whereby orders for either in-place utilization or deployment could be given directly by ADC headquarters to tactical units. SAC headquarters is only to be notified by ADC, and then the former were to pass the orders to its own units. During Operation Tailwind, only 36% of the fighter scrambles resulted in successful pounces of the bombers by fighters. Of that, only 4.2% of fighter scrambles resulted in a pounce before the bomb release sign. The Eastern Air Defense Command, Eastern Air Defense Force, their official history of Operation Tailwind, covering the Northeast United States. Their official history stated this about Operation Tailwind. Tailwind was an ADC-wide no-warning exercise. Strikes were to be undertaken on 2 successive days by aggressor forces. Every component of the air defense system joined in the efforts to counter these bomber penetrations at one time or another during the strike days. In addition, augmentation forces of other major commands, including the Tactical Air Command, Strategic Air Command, Air Training Command, Air Proving Ground Command, and the Air National Guard and supporting forces by the Navy, made appearances. Even the Alaska Air Command and Northeast Air Command participated by flashing warnings to the Air Defense Command. Normal routine at various headquarters within the Eastern Air Defense Force was punctuated on July 10, 1953, as it had been the day before the arrival of official observers for an air defense exercise. Representatives of the Strategic Air Command and Air Defense Command headquarters and a number of operational analysis were obvious in their presence at the several echelons of the Eastern Air Defense Force Command. The flow of intelligence information from the Air Defense Command and other sources was slow, a situation at variance from the normal. From the darkness of the night that followed, the radars of the 32nd Air Division picked up an intruder at 1:51 in the morning. The radar station at North Truro detected an unknown aircraft approaching from due east at 130 miles. At 1:55, a scramble was ordered and it was unsuccessful. The minutes passed slowly. Half an hour elapsed when a great many unknowns were picked up in rapid succession. The radar station at Highlands, New Jersey detected an unknown aircraft approaching New York City at 2:28 in the morning. At 2:30, the radar station at Palermo, New Jersey detected an unknown aircraft approaching Baltimore. At 2:34, the radar station at Highlands detected an unknown aircraft approaching New York City. At 2:39, the radar station at Palermo detected an unknown aircraft approaching Baltimore. At 2:40 in the morning, the radar station at Montauk, New York detected an unknown aircraft approaching New York City. 2:42 in the morning, the radar station at Palermo detected an unknown aircraft approaching Philadelphia. All were approaching from the southeast over the Atlantic Ocean. At 2:42 in the morning, at the Combat Operations Center at EDF headquarters at Stewart Air Force Base, was flashed a signal for cocked pistol, a simulated air defense readiness to the 3 air divisions, the Eastern Army Anti-Aircraft Command and the Eastern Sea Frontier. The EADF command post was activated. The Battle Staff Section A was ordered to report for duty at 2:45 in the morning. It was still 2 hours before the time when the strikes in the air defense exercise were to commence, according to the plan that they had. In the next 15 minutes, the total number of unknowns amounted to 30. The first appeared to be flying high and fast. Later, penetrating aircraft were detected at many heights up to 50,000 feet, flying at various speeds within minutes after declaring cocked pistol. A successful intercept was made, but darkness prevented discernment of the usual markings such as painted such as that are painted on Faker aircraft or bombers of other nations. Although identification had yet to be effected, the staff at the Combat Operations Center, still assuming the aircraft were intruders, to be the exercise aircraft of the Strategic Air Command, advanced the exercise status. At 3 in the morning, the Eastern Air Defense Force declared Applejack, code Applejack, a simulated warning red, passed to all agencies. Major General Morris R. Nelson, commanding officer of the Eastern Air Defense Force, entered the Combat Operations Center. At 3:10, he was briefed on the situation. The ADC duty officer had been contacted at Colorado Springs, and he had confirmed the fact that the exercise strikes were scheduled for this day, but the Strategic Air Command liaison officer had been totally unable to correlate any of the tracks up to that moment. The system was being saturated. All fighter interceptor aircraft on 5-minute alert had been scrambled and were then combing the sky, but no interceptions had been made. The time for decision was at hand. Although some of the penetrating aircraft were known to have reached the target area, many were perilously close to the principal sites of the eastern seaboard. However, there was still a margin of time to work on. General Nelson asked himself whether he should take a chance and continue the status appropriate for an exercise that the staff at the Combat Operations Center had initiated before his arrival, or call the shots as he saw them, reversing the action taken and declaring a code warning red. General Nelson questioned the Strategic Air Command liaison officer. He declared positively that it was not the exercise for which he had been briefed. General Nelson asked the ADC observers that if they could correlate the tracks. They replied in the negative. He double-checked his indicators and decided to push the big red button. At this point, a call was received from the Air Defense Command headquarters declaring big noise, code big noise, a simulated military emergency. In effect, Air Defense Command had taken it upon itself the responsibility of interpreting those tracks as part of the exercise. General Nelson had been in the Combat Operations Center a total of 4 minutes. Identification still had not been established, just as dawn broke in the Combat Operations Center. A flash message was received. Positive identification of the Faker aircraft had been made. Despite the mechanistic nature of the air defense system, in the final analysis, commanders will have to exercise individual judgment in a competent manner. Even under exercise conditions, they must adhere to, as General Nelson had done in Tailwind, the policies and procedures that had been erected as a barrier against a disastrous surprise attack. Author Alwyn T. Lloyd stated that Tailwind had been calculated to be the most rigorous exercise in which the air defense system had indulged. General Child Law had in fact felt it necessary to urge extreme caution in using the results of Operation Signpost or those of similar exercises as imperial yardsticks to measure either current or projected effectiveness. Too many unrealistic factors influence the results of even the most scrupulously accurate portrayal of an attack situation. In Tailwind, the thinking found expression in a statement of mission objectives, the reverse of Signpost. Testing and evaluation became secondary to the provision for realistic training and the employment of air defense facilities against realistic techniques of attack. Thus, where signposts sought evaluation and got training, Tailwind reversed the process and provided training rather than evaluation. Through the medium of two separate attacks on successive days, Tailwind was designed to exercise the air defense mechanism under circumstances favorable alternatively to the attackers and defenders. The plan for E2, July the 11th, was a model of offensive strategy, with bombers penetrating at various speeds and altitudes in concentration, diversion through electronic countermeasures, and diversionary strikes, and with the element of darkness and surprise in the attacker's favor. Clearance had been arranged for SAC to deploy a large number of its aircraft to overseas bases several days ahead of the exercise. The author continued, stating that Operation Tailwind was a rout for the Eastern Air Defense Force. Had this been for real, they would have been lost for 2 days running. The 773rd Aircraft Control and Warning Squadron had this to say about Tailwind in its report. On July 7, 1953, First Lieutenant Charles A. Huber visited the Montauk Air Force Station. The passive detection section. The site did not have adequate test equipment. This was also interference from local AA radars approximately 200 yards from the passive detection site. On July the 11th and 12th, the passive detection section at Montauk participated in Operation Tailwind. The technique of employing passive detection equipment was altered for this exercise. The receiver was set for a center frequency of 9,375 megahertz, and no searching was attempted. Direction finding fixes was not attempted with other passive detection stations. Direction information was furnished to the local radar site. When passive detection intercept information was correlated with the parent radar station track information, no further reports were given to the radar station. This mode of information appeared to be an improvement over tactics used during previous exercises. By remaining on a center frequency of 9,375 megahertz, the probability of intercept was immeasurably improved. However, if interception of penetrating aircraft was not made with the passive detection equipment, and these aircraft are maintaining the use of their navigational radar, new interceptions by passive detections equipment is more difficult. This is due to the fact that the signal strength of the near signals would mask the signals of the weaker distant signals. In comparing passive detection with the parent radar site, the following conclusions are forwarded concerning the exercise. Passive detection failed to make initial interception for this exercise. Citing specific signal H105 on July 12, 1953, the passive detection equipment appeared to have an intercept before the parent radar acquired by the main radar. The passive detection section at this station was short of manpower for this exercise. One of the operators was on furlough and the other was on emergency leave. This left only a complement of 3 personnel available for duty. It is well understood that indeed taking for one person to watch the scope for 8 continuous hours. The passive detection section at the Palermo Air Force Station in New Jersey also took part in Operation Tailwind. Advanced information was given to the operations section 13 minutes before the radar intercept on one penetration by the passive detection unit. Initial pickup by the passive detection section was 18 minutes in advance of the radar. However, accurate direction could not be obtained at that time. Later correlations fixed the aircraft 320 nautical miles distant from the radar at the time of the signal intercept. No direction-finding information could be obtained on the radar jamming aircraft due to the high cutoff frequency of the direction-finding antenna installed. The jamming frequency was in the range of 1,250 to 1,300 megahertz, and the cutoff frequency of the direction-finding antenna installed on the passive detection unit was 5,000 megahertz. A low-frequency antenna capable of direction finding the jamming signal was available at this site, but a part necessary to complete the antenna installation could not be obtained due to lack of proper authority to order the item. A comparable number of intercept signals during the exercise of Tailwind, when correlated with radar plots, proved to be in excess of 350 miles, with a few at 300 nautical miles. However, one big problem was noted: the majority of all airborne radars being at almost the same frequency, 9,300 to 9,500 megahertz. As soon as radar-equipped fighter interceptor aircraft were airborne and had their radars in operations, it became increasingly difficult to pick up a weak signal. As the strike aircraft and the fighters came into close range, the signal density became high enough to completely saturate the passive detection receivers, and interception of weak signals from a distant aircraft were all but impossible. This problem might easily be overcome by a more strategic location for passive detection sites. Recommendations were made for stronger cooling of the equipment in the K-53 vans during the summer months, as well as for the separation of the direction finding section and the passive detection section hotline to Eastern Air Defense Headquarters. The direction finding section and the passive detection section at the radar sites of Montauk, Highlands, and Palermo were all using the same phone line to reach headquarters at Roslyn, New York. So you have 6 personnel trying to use 3 telephones to call one telephone at generally the same time to report their information. This would cause busy signals, and vital information from these personnel at these sites would be delayed due to the telephone technology in use at that time. Author Bill Green stated that the yearly national exercise, codenamed Tailwind, was run by the Air Defense Command and Strategic Air Command in July. As usual, the defensive forces were aware that an exercise would occur, but had no advance notice of the direction or method of attack. Some warning was achieved 2 days before the exercise, when observers arrived at radar stations. Very early on Friday morning of July 10th, the radar station at North Truro, Massachusetts, detected the approach of an unknown bomber from due east. Tailwind wasn't scheduled to begin for 3 more hours. SAC had started 3 hours earlier than had been planned. An intercept was scrambled, but no contact was made. Half an hour later, North Truro detected another attack for another aircraft headed for Boston. Then in 20 minutes, stations throughout the 4,707th Air Defense Wing reported 6 more tracks headed for New York City, Baltimore, and Philadelphia. This was a real crisis in the Eastern Air Defense Command post. Major General Nelson, the EDF commanding general, believed the tracks were tailwind aircraft, could get no confirmation. If this was a real attack, the international situation was very unstable. President Eisenhower was out of Washington. The Joint Chiefs of Staff were preparing to meet to discuss defense policy. After repeated attempts to get acknowledgement of an early beginning to Operation Tailwind, General Nelson decided to call a real red alert, just as ADC finally advised that the tracks were indeed Faker aircraft. Meanwhile, the defense system was saturated. Backup interceptors were slow in getting airborne, and recovering aircraft couldn't be refueled and rearmed quickly enough. There was widespread confusion, and the attacking force was essentially unmolested. The unscheduled surprise had completely left ADC completely ineffective. The next day, Tailwind continued. Again, the attacks came from the East Coast, further south than an enemy attack would be able to penetrate. They came at night and at many different altitudes, using chaff and electronic countermeasures to confuse defensive radars. And they came in force. 63 bombers penetrated in 50 minutes. Only 4 of 21 interceptions were made that got to the bombers before the bomb release line. Seven of those got there after the line. Many were given inaccurate altitude information. In a real attack, the results would have been catastrophic. All targets would have been destroyed. The 27th Fighter Interceptor Squadron, stationed at Griffith Air Force Base, New York, was a tenant unit. While the squadron operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the base was shut down for the weekend, and civilian fuel truck drivers had the weekend off. Jet-powered F-86 and F-89s and F-94 aircraft had done poorly throughout the exercise. On Sunday, July 12th, Operation Tailwind was altered to provide circumstances more favorable to the defenders. All attacks came in daylight and in perfect weather. 29 bombers and 12 aircraft using electronic countermeasures attacked the Eastern Air Defense Force from the east, and 9 KC-97s attacked from the west, and in 22 separate missions. 15 were hit by interceptors before the bomb release line, and 4 were hit after the bomb release line. Only 3 were unhindered. 18 B-36s headed towards New York City were attacked continuously throughout a full hour. The interceptors had 21 successful passes before the bomb release line and 21 after. The 2nd Bomb Wing Unit published its Operations Order 61-53 on July 8th. On July the 11th, 1953, the 2nd Bomb Wing was to furnish 6 aircraft to attack Boston, Massachusetts, Springfield, Massachusetts, New York City, Baltimore, Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Richmond. An additional 7 aircraft would be used as a diversionary force. The 20th Bomb Squadron was to provide 4 primary aircraft and 1 spare aircraft. The 49th Bomb Squadron was to provide 5 primary aircraft and 1 spare aircraft. 98th Bomb Squadron was to provide 4 primary aircraft and 2 spare aircraft. The attacking raid was designated Raid 6 and the diversionary raid was designated Raid 13. Raid 6 was broken down as follows. 1 B-50 from the 98th for Route 6A. From the 98th Bomb Squadron. 1 B-50 from the 49th Bomb Squadron for Route 6B. 1 B-50 aircraft from the 20th Bomb Squadron. 1 B-50 from the 98th Bomb Squadron. 1 B-50 from the 49th Squadron would be on Route 6F. 1 B-50 from the 20th Bomb Squadron would be on 6E. Raid number 13 was broken down as follows. Route 13A would have 1 B-50 from the 49th Bomb Squadron. Route 13B would have 1 B-50 from the 98th Bomb Squadron. Route 13C would have 1 B-50 from the 49th Bomb Squadron. Route 13D would have 1 B-50 from the 20th Bomb Squadron. Route 13E, 1 B-50 from the 98th Squadron. Route 13F, 1 B-50 from the 49th Bomb Squadron. Route 13G, 1 B-50 from the 20th Bomb Squadron. Raid 6 would be launched at 6:05 Zulu time or 1:05 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Raid 13 would be launched at 0640 Zulu time or 1:40 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The 7th Bomb Wing Association stated on kneecap.org website that the July 1953 opened with three wing featherweight B-36s of the 9th, 436, and 492nd Bomb Squadrons participated in a 2-phase bombing operations on July 12th. The exercise was named Tailwind. Each bomber flew simulated attacks on 3 vital control centers of the Air Defense Command. Their targets were Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Buffalo, New York. Following the attacks, all aircraft recovered at Carswell, New Mexico. Aircraft commanders in the first phase were Frederick E. Bachman, Major Wells F. Zerdicki, and Major Thomas A. Bell. Also the same day, 18 B-36s took part in Phase 2 of Operation Tailwind, flying to Savannah, Georgia, then north for an attack on New York City. The 5 B-36 were from the 9th Bomb Squadron, 5 from the 436th Bomb Squadron, and 1 from the 492nd Bomb Squadron. Additionally, Lieutenant Colonel George E. Cameron of the 436th Bomb Squadron and Lieutenant Colonel Clifford Schoeffel of the 9th Bomb Squadron were the 2 formation leaders in Phase 2. All aircraft in Phase 2 landed at Carswell on July 10th following the completion of the mission. The 93rd Bomb Wing participated in Operation Tailwind also. The unit history stated that during the period of July 10th to the 12th, 1953, a joint training maneuver was conducted by units of Strategic Air Command, Air Defense Command, and the Royal Canadian Air Force. Task organizations of the 12th, 21st, 36th, and 57th Air Divisions and the 93rd Bomb Wing, with certain SAC elements staging from bases other than their home base during the exercise. The mission of SAC aircraft was to fly designated routes over the North American continent and adjacent areas for the purposes of training for SAC, Air Defense Command, and the Royal Canadian Air Force. 2 strike phases were incorporated into the operation, with only that portion flown by SAC aircraft over the eastern part of the United States during the first phase being evaluated. The task of the 93rd Bomb Wing in the first wave was to provide 10 B-50 aircraft in cell formation for diversionary maneuvers on July 10th. In Phase 1 of this maneuver, the mission results were considered excellent, with 90% of the scheduled B-50 aircraft effective. 1 aircraft aborted after takeoff with number 3 engine feathered. Task force discipline and radio security was considered superior and contributed to the success of the mission. Navigation was considered outstanding, even though radar was not utilized. Operators participating had an opportunity to exercise their capabilities for jamming voice frequencies under realistic conditions. The first or diversionary phase of this mission required maximum radio security. All personnel were briefed to maintain absolute radio silence. Radio ECM operators were assigned very high frequency or VHF frequencies to jam continuously, thereby preventing the vectoring of fighters by ground control interceptor (GCI) controllers. This phase of the mission was completely successful and no fighter air activity was encountered. The 72nd Strategic Reconnaissance Wing also took part in the exercise. The 72nd published Operations Order 61-53 on July the 8th for its part in Operation Tailwind. The 60th Strategic Reconnaissance Squadron was to provide 4 RB-36 aircraft to be ready by 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on July 12, 1953, with one of these as a ground spare. The 3 aircraft were designated Raid 301A. The raid had 4 targets on its route. Target 1 was Springfield, Massachusetts. Target 2 was Rikers Island, New York. Target 3 was Ocean City, New Jersey. Target 4 was Norfolk, Virginia. The 73rd Strategic Reconnaissance Squadron was to provide 4 B-36 aircraft ready by 1400 Zulu, also at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on July 12th, with 2 of these as ground spares. The 2 aircraft were designated Raid 301B. This raid had 4 targets on its route. Target 1 was Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Target 2 was Baltimore, Maryland shipyards. Target 3 was Richmond, Virginia. And Target 4 was Henderson, North Carolina. The 301st Strategic Reconnaissance Squadron was to provide 4 B-36 aircraft at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on July 12th, with 2 of these as ground spares. The 2 aircraft were designated as Raid 301C. This raid had 4 targets on its route. Target 1 was Norfolk, Virginia. Target 2 was Kingston, North Carolina. Target 3 was Conway, South Carolina. Target 4 was Charleston, South Carolina. These aircraft were to fly at 35,000 feet. This set of raids was also considered a big photo, as the radio call signs of the aircraft were Big Photo when communicating with the CAA or Air Defense Command along the routes. IFF or International Friend or Foe would not be used for this exercise. ECM and chaff would be used. The unit history stated that the most significant event which occurred during the month of July was the participation in exercise Tailwind. Although the event was not necessarily spectacular, our participation turned out to be significant because of the lessons learned. To begin with, Exercise Tailwind was a joint SAC Air Defense Command maneuver executed for the primary purpose of testing ADC defenses. Our effort in the exercise was but a small segment of a large two-phase, intricately timed deployment of SAC aircraft. As is often the case with our communications with the mainland, the states overseas, the operations plan was received just a few days before the execution date. Arrival of the plans did not lessen the scurrying and head-scratching, for there were several points to be cleared up before we could make detailed plans and brief the troops. As it turned out, the wing's effort consisted of a three-pronged task force of 7 aircraft. This force made up of 2 ship elements and 1 3-ship element. And each element was assigned separate targets for each of the 3 elements at the same target time for hitting their respective assigned targets. And since a very meager amount of training would be realized from this directed portion of the mission, each element was given an additional requirement for the 3 target runs on the homeward journey. Since the primary purpose for this report is to record the happenings of the past, it is with thanks for the clarity of vision for which we are endowed when the switch is in the hindsight. Looking back strictly from an observer's point of view, we can relate many errors, mistakes, and outright blunders which were accomplished by the staff observers and observers on the combat crews. But before getting into a discussion of lessons learned after the mission was flown, it is noteworthy to mention that directed portions of the mission lack several desirable navigation features. The most desirable feature which was missing was the use of predetermined time for penetrating the unfriendly area. Also, the assignment of a target time made it necessary for some of the crews to orbit or dogleg in unfriendly territory, since wind at altitude was not known until relatively close to the target. The history continued. The wing's first attempt to perform electronic jamming occurred during the recent exercise Tailwind. 2nd Air Force Operations Order 6153 for this maneuver specified that the 72nd Strategic Reconnaissance Wing aircraft would be a bombardment force with which to penetrate the Air Defense Command at a given time on July 12, 1953. Our aircraft were assigned the task to spot jam ground control intercept radars, ground control fighter communication frequencies, and initiate chaff drops at brief coordinates. A brief debriefing of the combat crews for this mission, in addition to technical analysis of jamming logs, indicated that our jamming was quite effective. The summary was based upon the following data: an intercepted VHF fighter frequency changed whenever electronic jamming was executed. Fighter contact or intercept was meager, and no fighter passes were attempted or reported. Atomic weapons were to be simulated being loaded and used for this mission. The unit history narrative continued. Highlighting the tactical operations for the month was the Wing's participation in Operation Tailwind on July 12th. This mission was primarily designated to test the Air Defense Command and Tactical Air Command defenses. Each element was assigned a separate target: Norfolk, Virginia, Harrisburg, PA, and Springfield, Massachusetts. Our aircraft were designated bombardment aircraft and as such had to penetrate in formation. The Wing was relieved of this requirement, but not of the identical target times for all participating aircraft. This necessitated close communication as to takeoff schedules, notwithstanding that with a 10-minute takeoff interval and a 1-hour requirement. Thus, the latest metric had to be and was utilized to establish the not later than takeoff of the first aircraft. Actual weather conditions resulted in an error in the cushion time of 27 minutes for the first aircraft to 35 minutes for the last aircraft. Normally, central time for all participating aircraft, after which is established after being met, caused the actual target time to be automatic. On this mission, the best it could be was a not later than control time at Bermuda, incorporating this point into a cushion of time. It would have been desirable that our central time be placed upon entering unfriendly territory, but this was not deemed feasible in that at this point the Wing had no clearly defined and distinguishable geographic features for positive identification. This exercise was primarily to test Air Defense Command defenses. As such, it follows logically that a target time is of secondary importance. Our aircraft were designed to spot jam radar stations and fighter aircraft communication frequencies and initiate chaff drops at brief coordinates. So, 2nd Air Force observer personnel advised that the Wing it was rated as performing more electronic jamming than any other Second Air Force unit. This was especially gratifying since the Wing had received its initial issue of jamming equipment just 3 weeks prior to the operation. It is logical to assume that ADC forces would monitor the International Civil Air Organization radio channels. Flights following aircraft operating in the oceanic control area. This intercept capability permitted them to obtain information regarding our control points and penetration points through the Coastal Air Defense Identification Zones, or ADIZs. On operations of this nature, where block altitude reservations are used, ICAO radio silence would be maintained. 5 of the 7 aircraft failed to complete the mission as briefed. 3 aircraft were forced to abort due to fuel shortages, and 2 because of mechanical difficulties. We had no sooner completed a critique of our participation in Operation Tailwind when we received a visit by a team of officers from the training section of the 2nd Air Force. In addition to their inspection of our training records and discussion of past and projected training programs, the team also set in on a rerun of the critique we had given the crews. In general, the members of the 2nd Air Force team agreed that our evaluation of our mission and accepted our comments regarding the tardiness of their plans. Again, retrospect indicated the unsoundness of assigning target time rather than a specific time for penetration of enemy territory. The inspection team was satisfied with the way the records are being kept in the observation section. The lack of training in actual photo flash bombing, due to several reasons, with the absence of suitable resolution targets being the predominant reason, generated a suggestion for the construction of a much larger target on one of the many small islands between Ramey and the mainland. The 2nd Air Force inspection team discussed tailwind. During the exercise, the 72nd Strategic Reconnaissance Wing scheduled 7 aircraft. 5 landed in the zone of the interior with maintenance and fuel difficulty. Only one of the 5 landed short of Ramey because of actual fuel shortage. The unit history of the 376th Bomb Wing had this to say about its action in Phase 2 of Operation Tailwind. The 9th of July was designated Execution Day. All times were in zebra. On July 10th was E+1. Phase 1 was to be E+2, or July the 11th. H hour was 6 o'clock in the morning Zulu. Phase 2 was to be E+3, or July 12th, 1953, at 1400 Zulu. On July 12th, elements of the 376th Bomb Wing, in conjunction with elements of the 8th Air Force and 15th Air Force, participated in Phase 2 of the Joint 8 SAC ADC Operation Tailwind. 18 B-36s from the 19th Air Division, 8th Air Force, flying information, were scheduled to hit New York from 40,000 feet. 4 B-47 aircraft from the 305th Bomb Wing were scheduled to hit the following targets: Baltimore, Maryland, with 2 aircraft; Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, 1 aircraft; and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 1 aircraft. From optimum altitude not to exceed 39,000 feet, the 376th Bomb Wing scheduled 10 B-29s to fly 40-minute ECM orbits over radar sites located at Palermo, New Jersey, Camp Hero, New York, North Truro, Massachusetts, and Navesink, New Jersey. 1 B-47 and 1 B-29 from the 376th Bomb Wing were scheduled to dispense chaff from 32,000 feet and 25,000 feet, respectively. These 10 ECM raids from the 376th Bomb Wing were named Task Force 316. Of the 10 ECM raids by the 376th Bomb Wing, the first penetration of 1 B-29 began at a control point approximately 235 nautical miles southeast of Palermo, New Jersey. Due to the low altitude of attack, 1,500 feet, prior to climbing to orbit altitude, it was assumed that the bomber did not come under early warning surveillance until it reached a point along the course approximately 70 nautical miles from the radar site. After reaching the Palermo radar site, the aircraft began a 40-minute ECM orbit at 8,000 feet. The raid ECM raid number 5 of 1B-29 began at a control point approximately 245 nautical miles southeast of Sandy Hook, New Jersey. Due to the low altitude of the attack, 1,500 feet prior to climbing the orbit altitude, it was assumed that the bomber did not come under radar surveillance until it reached a point along the course approximately 70 nautical miles from the radar site. After reaching the Navesink radar site, the aircraft began a 40-minute radar ECM orbit at 8,000 feet. This aircraft reported 4 separate fighter encounters. The first encounter began at 12:41 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, approximately 100 nautical miles east of Newport News, and lasted for 2 minutes. The 1 F-94 aircraft and the 1 F-80 aircraft made no passes of the bombers. Fighters pulled up for recognition only. Leading position of the tip tanks of the F-80 aircraft were blue. Second encounter began at 1:13 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over Sandy Hook and lasted for approximately 7 minutes. The single F-4U used moderately aggressive attacks. 1 pass was made from the 2 o'clock position and the remainder from the 8 o'clock high position. The fighter had New York stamped on its fuselage and R-37 Navy on the tail. The third encounter began at 1:23 p.m. over Sandy Hook and lasted 10 minutes. 3 F-4U Navy aircraft made several moderately aggressive attacks from the 8 o'clock position, and 1 fighter had R painted on the tail in 37. The fourth encounter began at 2:33 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, approximately 10 nautical miles north of Newport News, and lasted 10 minutes. 4 F-84 aircraft made moderately aggressive attacks on the bombers from 7 o'clock high, and dark horizontal stripes were noted on the vertical stabilizers of all fighters. ECM raid number 6 of 1B-29 began at a control point 240 nautical miles southeast of Sandy Hook. Due to the low altitude of 2,000 feet prior to climbing to orbit altitude, it was assumed that the bomber did not come under radar surveillance until it reached a point along the course approximately 70 miles from the radar site. After reaching the Navesink radar site, the aircraft began a 40-minute radar ECM orbit at 10,000 feet. This aircraft encountered fighters at 4 separate points. The first encounter began at 12:29 p.m. and lasted approximately 15 miles south of Sandy Hook and lasted for 7 minutes. 5 F-94 aircraft participated in attacks of this bomber. 3 fighter aircraft effected contact. 2 more fighter aircraft joined these immediately. Of these 5 fighters, 1 pair remained out of range. 1 aircraft left the area, and the remaining pair made many passes from 6 o'clock high. At the conclusion of each attack, the fighters broke seaward, joining the 3 F-94s in trail. The attacks were very aggressive. The second attack began at 12:58 p.m. over Long Branch, New Jersey, and lasted 9 minutes. 1 F-4U naval aircraft made 1 non-aggressive low and slow attack. The fighter had B painted on the tail and a red stripe around the fuselage in front of the tail assembly. An estimated 100 to 150 fighter attacks were made on Task Force 316. The general opinion of the gunners is that of all the fighters encountered, the most aggressive were the F-84s making attacks in the Langley area. In general, the fighters worked in pairs. The mission was considered successful from the standpoint of the strike aircraft. All bombers that were reported on reached their target without intercepting. This was believed to be accomplished by the following combinations of high altitude, high speed, poor radar returns, and ECM activity against radar sites. The ECM aircraft were intercepted prior to and after their orbit points over the radar sites. It is believed that high losses would have been suffered by this force. It is believed that mission utilizing ECM orbit aircraft should be conducted at night or in periods of restricted visibility to assume maximum ECM effectiveness over a longer period and to minimize the aircraft losses. In August 1953, Air Defense Command asked the U.S. Air Force to include in its Air Force regulations, which provided the mission and responsibilities of major air commands concerned, the responsibility providing forces for operational control of ADC in an emergency and for training their forces for employment in air defense. ADC suggested that the provision for the SAC regulation be qualified with the words, forces that are not required for immediate participation in strategic air operations. Air Force Headquarters accepted this proposal completely, even to the wording suggested by ADC. Changes were issued in the regulation of the Air Training Command and Air Proving Command, Air Research and Development Command, and the Tactical Air Command in October, which added to their responsibilities. Upon notification by the Air Defense Command or higher headquarters that an air attack upon the United States is imminent, provide to the operational control of Air Defense Command all forces that have an air defense capability and are located in or immediately adjacent to the continental United States. Train all units for that purpose in air defense capabilities for the employment in air defense of the United States. When appropriate, such units will be provided with auxiliary air defense equipment. The SAC regulation issued in March 1954 provided as a secondary responsibility the same requirement as for the other commands, but with a qualifying statement suggested by ADC. In regards to augmentation forces, ADC Historical Study No. 5 stated, the second great test of the augmentation plan came in July 1953 when Operation Tailwind, the second nationwide air defense exercise, was held. During this exercise, a total of 182 aircraft were made available by ATRC, Air Proving Ground Command, TAC, and SAC. The number was not as large as it might have been because of the extensive conversion program underway at this time, plus heavy losses to overseas. The history continued. In Tailwind, direct alerting from Air Defense Command headquarters of augmentation forces tactical units deployed was tried, and the communication times were greatly reduced. Following the exercise, ADC worked out a plan with all the commands except for SAC, which established a definite basis for a procedure whereby orders for in-place utilization and deployment was given by ADC headquarters to the augmentation forces. Author Bill Green stated in the book The First Line that Tailwind had been a severe test of air defense capabilities, and ADC had unquestionably failed that test. it had only been of marginal value as a training exercise. Penetration of the bombers southeast of the concentrated northern bases failed to provide training for those key bases was unrealistic. Russia would almost uncertainly be unable to exploit the soft area below the Canadian border. Still, tailwinds strongly emphasized the vulnerability of the system to saturation tactics and the problems in tracking aircraft above 50,000 feet or below 5,000 feet with radar. In a seminar at the Air War College at Maxwell Air Force Base in January 1954, it was stated that, as had been demonstrated by Operation Tailwind, under weather or instrument conditions, no more than 3 fighter aircraft can be held by ground control intercept at any one time, without ECM activity, with positive kill requirements dictate a minimum of 4 fighter interceptor aircraft, and in most cases 5 aircraft. A defense study titled The Evolution of U.S. Strategic Command and Control and Warning stated that the Strategic Air Command sent 94 bombers against the air defense system, employing all techniques available to it: night attack, surprise, diversionary attacks, electronic countermeasures, saturation attacks, and so on. Only 7 attackers were successfully intercepted. The following day, against daylight attacks, the air defense intercepted 29 out of 38 SAC aircraft. Yet obviously a real attack would come by night. The exercise pointed up the need for better early warning, solid radar coverage from 0 to 50,000 feet, and some automatic means of tying radar data and displaying that to battle commanders. Author Eric Schlosser said the same thing in his book Command and Control. The study continued. The summer study group, however, seemed vindicated in its criticism of the inadequacy of the warning and air defense system of Exercise Tailwind in July 1953. The Eastern Air Defense Force stated that during Exercise Tailwind, EADF identified 108 Faker aircraft comprised of 162 bombers. During the same period, fragmentary information received on 43 more tracks. These 43 tracks were never identified, and whether or not they were Fakers could not be correlated by Air Defense Command or SAC observers. Against the 108 identified Fakers tracks, EDF scrambled 520 aircraft, and of these, 403 were successfully pounced, reached a position to initiate an attack. The anti-aircraft artillery defenses in New York City engaged 3 Faker tracks. One of the problems that gave away the exercise was the supposed to be a no warning exercise was that a group of operation analysis personnel and SAC observers reported to the headquarters of the 32nd Air Division 2 days before the exercise began. Concurrently, SAC observers reported to radar squadrons in sufficient time to place everyone on alert for the exercise. The recommendations of the observers of the 32nd Air Division during Operation Tailwind were concurred in by high headquarters of Eastern Air Defense Force and Air Defense Command. On July 31, 1953, Brigadier General Kenneth P. Berquist wrote to Brigadier General T. Allen Bennett, commander of the 25th Air Division, stating that as to exercise tailwind, you are, of course, familiar with the surprise aspects. All the reports are not in yet, so I can't give a thorough reading on how it went, except to say that very evidently the second day ran much more smoothly than the first, and I think that it gave a fairly good account of ourselves overall. We think your use of video mapping units for direct reporting is a smart move. I'm sure that it reduced your filtering problems at direction centers levels during the exercise. We realize, too, you still have communications that need to be filled before your filtering problem can be entirely solved. We will be interested in learning how it went during Tailwind. So that is my take on Operation Tailwind. In all honesty, Operation Tailwind was a complete rout for the Air Defense Command. SAC just saturated and destroyed the Air Defense Command on this. So it was amazing how efficient, they were, the bombers, on this. So if you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you. Bye.